Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
Oh man, they're trying to make me feel good with this music. Anyway, this is America's Heroes Group and the Roundtable with partner, Veteran Affairs Legislative Voice, podcast, and AHG correspondent. Today is Saturday, October 28th, 2023. October is also Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Pay attention to those and try to help those in need and people you can help to prevent them from going through those situations. Host is Cliff Kelley, the iconic. I am the co-host, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And Scouts Honor, he is fantastic. Today's topic, we have Stephanie Kalota. She is a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant, First Class, veteran, and founder of this and creator of the Veteran Legislative Voice podcast, and she is also one of our esteemed AHG correspondents. Her topic is going to be covering the new speaker and how his policies could affect military and veterans. And when I say the speaker, I'm talking about none other than Mike Johnson. How will his policies affect our military and our veterans? How are you doing, Stephanie?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing today?
Oh, good. Yeah, you have really a very, very timely topic. I think that's really important. So it's like you're on top of the media. Buzz.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
So why don't you tell us, what's your view on how this new speaker will affect our veterans' benefits and what we can actually look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to speak about this person because for a lot of people that were actually trying to track and watch what was going on with the entire mess about trying to get a new Speaker of the House, a lot of people were not familiar with Representative Mike Johnson. He was kind of a sleeper, he came out of nowhere for a lot of people and kind of surprised. So people are unfamiliar with him and his issues and his voting record, and it can actually cause some effects in the next session in a couple of months with everything going on. And Representative Mike Johnson is from Louisiana, which has been a hot topic lately. It's not directly with military and veterans, but it's kind of important down the road for when it comes to voting because Louisiana has been having a lot of issues with its districts and trying to get it remapped for gerrymandering. And one of Mike Johnson's district is part of the entire contention. And so it's going to possibly change the next voting session and everything with, it's presidential election next year, so it can really cause a lot of effects. And with him being a speaker, he can try to do some more push and pull and influence to try to keep it towards the GOP and conservative side. So we have to be mindful of that as well. But for military and veterans, he's voted against bills that have really helped or could help a lot of veterans. He voted against the PACT Act last year. And for those that aren't familiar, the PACT Act is one of the most progressive bills that has ever passed for veterans for all of the toxic exposures that they might have been exposed to when they went to the Gulf War and post 9/11 wars and operations. And it listed a lot of conditions that were that made them automatically presumptive to that way if a service member comes up with a lung condition, then lung cancer, and if they served in the wars covered under the PACT Act, they're automatically, qualified for it. They just have to file the claim, and that's all they have to do.
Yes. Yeah, and thank goodness that the PACT Act actually went through despite his negative vote on it on the bill, and because he had just joined Congress in 2017, and from what I understand, he then served as the vice chairman of the House Republican Conference since 2020. So as you said, he came out of sort of nowhere, but
Hmm.
he has elevated himself to a position where he's now like I think the third person in line or second person in line, after the president, if the president leaves office for any other reason,
Third.
or third, yeah.
He's the third after the vice president. It would be the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
So, and also, speaking of elections and political offices, he was actually one of the leaders that had led the fight to decertify the election for President Biden.
Yeah, that shocks me, because one of
Yes.
the things is like, when you had sent us some information, I've read that, and it's like we are still not sure if he has any kind of criminal involvement in that conspiracy either.
Yeah, we're
which
not
is
even sure if he's completely guilty of possible insurrection, if he had anything to do with January 6th, because this topic came up a lot for Jim Jordan because his name was out there the most for the January 6th committee investigations. So this one with Mike Johnson, he was still on the list. He just wasn't as visible as Jim Jordan's.
Yeah, and it's really disturbing to me because we have at least 4 attorneys have pled guilty so far, and it's worrisome to me because I'm sitting there going like, if people are pleading guilty, then you start wondering, are you really working for the people, or are you just working for your party? And
Yeah.
and that's something that we have got to start looking at because that is something that if we don't start looking at the country, I'm a veteran, so I'm pretty much nonpartisan. I've voted for Republicans and Democrats, right, over time, the course of my life, when I thought
Yeah.
that they were doing the right thing. But this is something that I think they have to understand that this is about whether we have a sovereign nation anymore. And
Hmm.
and to put someone into a political position where they have so much power and they have potentially been involved in criminal activities is just mind blowing to me.
Yes, yes, and it's so scary of how close we were to actually losing our sovereignty in the first place. So having the possibility of it occurring again is pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
For those that, for those that were readers and have read A Handmaid's Tale,
Mhm.
it was stark and really scary to watch January 6th because I've watched the show and I've read the books prior to the January 6th events, and I was like, it is just like in the book or just like in the TV show of how the sovereignty of the U.S. had fallen in, the book, in the fictional story, and how close it got. It was really similar and it was really scary.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't just that branch of government, but we had so many branches of government. We had 3 branches of government, but even the Supreme Court became embroiled in everything, this whole upheaval.
Hmm.
We had even the legislative branch getting involved in this upheaval. Executive branch involved in this upheaval, and I'm going like, when is it when do you get to the point where we reestablish our country? And this
Yeah.
is from a very, very nonpartisan comment, is that it's the country and the people that matter, not what a political party wants to do to execute itself as being the lead party in our nation. That
Right.
that they're supposed to be working together for our common people. So, even what you were saying before, I mean, even Johnson did support legislation making it easier for veterans to see doctors outside the DVA, the Department of Veterans Affairs. But it's a spotty record. It's like back and forth. The Defense Authorization Act, he was sort of back and forth on that, even though he, was supporting things in some positions and not. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that, how he sort of wavered a bit on some of the things
Yeah.
and some of the dangers back there.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, under President Trump's administration, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, which is what funds the federal DOD and VA side of the government, is where that funding will go through under that bill. And there was a lot of changes with that National Defense Authorization Act, and it went back and forth. And we had, just like all of the years before, we've had to use continuing resolutions to keep the government going. And in this place, we did have the government shut down, and President Trump had made last-minute stipulations on the National Defense Authorization Act. He didn't like the rule to change 6 military bases' names from their Confederate general name, the memorialization of a Confederate general's name, and then change it to something else that was not as, so that they're not named after treasonous people, obviously.
Right.
And President Trump had brought that up at the last second after everything else had been approved and passed and everything. And so Congress somehow decided to say screw it and send it to President Trump, and he vetoed it. Well, Congress was able to override his veto, which doesn't happen very often. You need a 2/3 vote for this. So 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. And at this time, and it's also true today, during this time, the split between the parties was 51-49. So, so they were able to get enough people on the opposite party to vote for it to override President Trump's veto, which is what Representative Johnson did do. He did vote for overriding President Trump's veto, which is kind of daunting to me that this actually happened. But you know what? He's voted against things that can be really controversial. I mean, he voted against one bill that would actually mandate the states recognize service members and their spouses valid professional licenses from other states when they have to PCS, when they have to move from one station to another. Mm-hmm. And, military spouses' unemployment is remarkably high. I believe it's like 30%, while the country is below 6%. So it's really crazy, but that's because of how often they have to move. And so often spouses have to quit their jobs. And then when they move to another state, if they're a massage therapist, if they're a doctor, if they are a real estate agent, they have licensing that they have to pay for. And each individual state has their own licensing requirements, their own testing, their own fees. So this bill would have mandated the states to recognize service members and military spouses, licenses from other states, which would have been a great thing to help, with the unemployment numbers. And he voted against it.
Yes.
This wouldn't even cost the government money.
Right.
Because I know conservatives are so much about the money. This wouldn't even cost the government any money for this, by the way.
Yes, and you're also cutting off the services they could be providing to the public they're supposed to be serving.
Yes.
Because they have an essential part of our workforce. And
so often military families are on, they're on food stamps. And this could have happened. This could actually cause the government more money because if they only were back to a 2-income household back to a 1,
right.
then they might actually qualify for the benefits that would cost the government more money.
That's an excellent point, and the whole licensure thing is so crazy to me. I recently had to recertify for my licensure for practicing medicine in Illinois. And so I got my Illinois license and my Illinois DEA, but I had to get the federal DEA. And when I contacted them, I said, as I'm renewing this for $881, I said, why is it that you have 15 questions now? These new questions about whether you are certified for marijuana, this and that. I said, you're asking me all these questions about prescribing medications. But I said, but then I drive down the street and I have dispensaries all around me.
Yeah, exactly.
and they're right next to your FBI offices. They're next to all your.
Yeah.
So it's such a confused kind of thing with that. But again, I think you're right. If we could have a national license for those people who are in the military and their spouses and their family members as they're moving, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. He's also voted against ensuring veterans won't lose their GI Bill benefits if a school has to close for a future emergency, just like the COVID pandemic. So he voted against that, protection for our veterans for their GI Bill benefits, which would, it would only help our veterans even more. Like we're giving out the money anyways, and it's really crazy how this how much this really would hurt veterans if it wasn't passed.
Yeah, and then, so the PACT Act, with the exposures now, we do have people who have toxic exposures, and thank God that they saw it and had the wisdom to do that, to pass it. But do you think that there are any complications coming down the road if they seize power? The one thing I learned, I was the director for the Illinois Department of Public Health in past life, and one of the things I learned is that legislators can change things overnight with
Yes,
the stroke
they
of a
can.
pen, and they can. So, is this something that we have to think about with protecting these rights that we already have?
It's possible because actually a few years ago, I cannot remember the exact agency, but it was one of the conservative-backed nonprofits did their analysis of how to cut spending and how to decrease funding and things like this. And then one of the suggestions was to cut certain things for veterans benefits, and that would be the VA disability. One of them was a recommendation to actually cut VA disability once a veteran becomes eligible for Social Security, for the Social Security retirement benefits, instead of being able to collect both, which is pretty scary because certain veterans, like myself, I became fully disabled fairly early in life at 35, and I collect VA disability and Social Security at the same time because, I have enough work credits. I qualify for both, and I only do this voluntarily stuff, and so I don't make money for all of these things that I do for you guys, just FYI.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah, all of this is just voluntary stuff that I do for stuff. So,
sounds like we owe you a lot of lunches over here.
It's okay. It's okay. I have to be constantly working on something, despite how much problems I have. But for veterans, having that cut of having the Social Security or the VA disability cut is just so scary. For me, I'll even say it. I was lucky enough to earn enough and work long enough to collect Social Security at my age, and so I collect $2,100 a month. I wouldn't be able to survive on that of just $2,100 a month. And then for VA disability at being paid at 100%, I believe it's around $3,400 a month. So veterans can't live $3,400 a month in most states. Yes. It's really scary when you're being cut down to that amount of income for some people. I mean, just imagine trying to live in California at $3,400 a month. You can't do that, especially in the LA area of how expensive housing is. And with inflation going higher, it's even more scary. So these types of things need to be really understandable and explained out for that, so people are aware that this may happen. There's other benefits that they could also try to take away, and it's pretty scary that we have to be really cognizant of that. So we have to be aware. They have talked about taking away Social Security or raising the Social Security age. So, and then also talk about taxing Social Security, which was actually brought up by the Democrats in the first place in the early 90s. This talk is coming up again, but on the GOP side.
Scary. Absolutely terrifying. And I was just thinking about that is that many of them actually don't really get their benefits through the same mechanisms, through as the executive branch does for our people from the Department of Defense and those places where almost none of them serve that, right?
Yes.
So I know Johnson wasn't a service member as well, but
nope.
This thing is that it's so incredibly troublesome that we have people who are sitting there making decisions on veterans who don't really have that experience. And when I start thinking about the past rhetoric, because I met John McCain in the Capitol in the past, he was one of the greatest people I could ever speak to. A very, very nice person. Didn't always agree with all the policies he had, but he was forthright. He was acting in the right way that a responsible legislator should.
And he was a statesman.
He was a statesman.
He was a statesman.
Yes, and So he had disagreements, but he knew about meeting in the middle of the aisle on certain things, and he just went forward from there. So I always had deep respect for him and his family. So,
Yeah.
but then to have him, people talking about his military service when they had bone spurs when stuck in the wood on the floor at their home.
Yes.
I get so enraged with that. And my family is the military family. And so when things like this are happening, where they're talking about cutting the Social Security, cutting the benefits, it's hitting me too personally. It's a personal attack. And so when I go to vote, I'm going to be voting for the people who actually are supporting our veterans. If they're not supporting the veterans, they don't need to be in office from my viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of a lot of the things that were added to this year's National Defense Authorization Act that a lot of people were against. There was a lot of extreme right policies that were inserted into that bill, and one of them was canceling any gender affirming care, not allowing transgenders in the military, prohibiting the use of reimbursements for travel costs for abortion services. There was another one. They could not use LGBTQ flags in or hang them in VA facilities. Little things. Like, seriously, that's what you're worried about? I'm worried about trying to get everybody, their paychecks.
How about having a Speaker of the House?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so scary right now. He was also against funding for giving more funding for Ukraine. So that's something that can be really scary as well.
Yes.
We're not sure about where his stance is. I'm not sure where his stance is about Israel, because that can cause a lot of issues. Although Israel has told the U.S., you know what, we got this, but we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Because because service members have gotten the alert of be ready just in case. And so who knows on how that might come out down the line. It can be really scary for us on those decisions.
Yes,
And Representative Mike Johnson was on the Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee. So he has a little bit of knowledge of what goes on there, but not personal military knowledge. So we got to watch carefully and see how it goes from there when those things start moving.
Yeah, and and you have an incredibly important point, Stephanie. So people are on alert right now who are going to be serving in a uniform, which is a very small fraction of our country, right, that actually ever serves. They're sitting there, and they may be deployed when their spouse can't get a job. And they're going to have to
during
leave
a
them
government
here.
shutdown.
And leave them there. And so their licenses and all those things, we're not going to worry about that. So you're voting against our service members' families while you're asking them to go overseas and put their life on the line.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yes, you're asking their families to make sacrifices, but we're not going to help you, try to make those sacrifices just a little bit easier.
Yeah. So what do you see as the things that we need to get involved in on the legislative horizon? Because it seems like you're really tied into it. You're one of the greatest legislative voices I've heard so far.
Thank you.
And articles, people need to read your things too. So I'm just saying that. Go to your website. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, and I've been starting my own podcast as well because I just try to take small subjects and just break them down into 5-10 minute sections to make it really easy for people to understand. And so those things would make things really easy. So definitely, I always encourage people to contact their elected officials. Tell them what you're experiencing, what's going on, and what you need to make things just a little bit easier. Many many elected officials, their staff, I mean, they really need to hear from their constituents. They understand things better when they do hear from their constituents. Look them up, give them a call, ask for the liaison whoever that handles military and veterans issues. If they don't have one, they usually will have at least somebody to speak with. Usually when I call my House representative, I speak to the legislative director. Because they don't have a military one assigned yet, but I still talk to them about different things and help them out on understanding military things. And that way they get a little bit more understanding, and then they also figure out how to vote and and what to introduce in legislation, where to really put their stance on things. And it really does help them a lot. I mean, a lot of people don't think that they listen to their constituents, but they really do.
Yes, yes. And then one of those things, I'm an older guy, so I don't have to worry too much about what I say anymore. But but if you don't vote for our veterans, then if you don't put them first, we're going to put you last when it comes to voting. And
yeah, I always get really frustrated when elected officials play the partisan game, because if a Democrat introduced a bill or a Republican introduces a bill, and it really just helps out veterans and military, the opposite party almost always votes against it. I mean, very rarely they don't. So it's really frustrating for me, and I will call them out when they play that partisan game. I don't care.
Thank you. That's and that was the thing where we were saying before about, they put the party first before the people. And and when you get to the point of we're doing that with veterans, boy, you should be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened with the PACT Act last year, and one of the frustrating things is that the opposite party had made up a lot of lies about what's in the PACT Act, so a lot of people became confused of what was in there, because there was actually accusations that there was pork barrel spending inside the PACT Act, when it really wasn't. It was funding to help build and create and lease facilities for the VA and servicing our veterans.
Well, Stephanie, we have about 2 minutes to go, but what I want to do is have you just give us a sort of a closeout, but, have Glenda circling around me, and you know about her.
Yes. Love you, Glenda.
Okay, so just give us an idea of what your main message is. Go ahead.
All right, well, pretty much speak to your elected officials. Tell them what's going on. Some don't even know what the price of milk is today. Tell them it's $4.39 in my area. So tell them what's going on in your life, what's going on where you're living, and so that they can understand what to do. You guys can find me on Veteran Legislative Voice, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, and I post my podcast on there. I'm on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the others there for you.
Yeah, I wonder when we're going to get to the point where we stop saying Twitter. X, it used to be Twitter.
I know, it's too weird to say X.
But very, very good. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You have been very, very insightful. Gave us a lot of education on what's going on with this and why we need to pay attention to these legislative moves. So I want to stay tuned to America's Heroes Group. We will be back. I'm going to some beautiful music, so just stick around, and I'll be on the other side.